Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 489. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about palaces, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, waterfalls, emperors, and cabbages as we go to Croatia.
I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Without further ado, let's talk about Croatia. I'd like to welcome Jay from Jay Travel, who's come to talk to us about Croatia. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
And many of you may recognize Jay as they've been sponsoring our transcripts of the Amateur Traveler for a while, and I just got a chance to use their service. We actually were in Croatia doing some of what Jay will be talking about, but we're not going to really talk about my trip. We're going to talk about your trip. We're going to talk about what Jay would recommend for a trip to Croatia. So, Jay, thanks for coming on, and thanks for helping arrange our trip. And I should say that Jay didn't do that as a sponsorship. We paid them to do it, and they did a nice job. But we'll talk more about that in the course of the conversation. This isn't intended to be promoting Jay Travel, except that I had a really good experience, so it's going to come out that way.
I don't mind.
I'm sure you don't. So why should somebody go to Croatia?
Well, several reasons. For me, Croatia is really a place that has everything you could look for in a travel experience. I went to Croatia for the first time about 12 years ago after having traveled extensively in Europe. And when I first arrived to Croatia, I got there and I said to myself, this is the place that has it all. I finally kind of found it. I mean, it's got everything you could look for, from breathtaking scenery with just incredible natural beauty, a gorgeous coastline, which is its claim to fame, crystal clear blue waters. There's over 1,000 islands, definitely rich in history. a number of UNESCO sites throughout the country, a lot of Roman and Venetian influence that contributes to that history.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of cultural activities throughout the country, festivals, concerts, great museums to enjoy. There's palaces, there's castles, and just some of the architecture is just gorgeous, beautiful restored buildings and famous orange rooftops that are kind of unique to Croatia and make up the landscape. The food and wine is great. Definitely a place to enjoy some seafood, great local wines. So definitely a place for foodies, I would say. Place you could enjoy some more active type excursion. There's national parks. You can get out hiking, biking. Obviously with the coastline, some great water sports. I found the people there to be very friendly, very welcoming. I think, they're very accustomed to tourists, so they know how to treat their guests, let's say. It is a more seasonal place, so the season probably runs for about 6-7 months of the year from about beginning of April till mid to end October. So you can expect, very comfortable weather during that time. Definitely some warmer temperatures in the peak summer months, but hopefully with little rain, usually in that time. So the temperature-wise, very comfortable.
Now, my impression is if you're on the coastline, if you went there in the wintertime, we're not talking about a harsh winter anyway, but they don't get nearly as much tourism in that time of year.
Yeah, the off-season months running from, let's say kind of November till March, things tend to shut down, unfortunately, so it's probably not the ideal time.
Mm-hmm.
But still comfortable. I mean, if you're there just for sightseeing and just enjoying the towns and, not so much of an emphasis on going on boats or beaches and that sort of things. There's a lot to do in the town still, but things do shut down. But you got places like Zagreb, which is the capital city, certainly a year-round destination. But some of the coastal stuff you probably do want to avoid for 4 or 5 months of the year.
Okay. What kind of itinerary would you recommend for, say, 1 weekish?
For a week, we typically do recommend that they kind of concentrate themselves to the south of Croatia, a region known as Dalmatia.
Mm-hmm.
So that would stretch basically the furthest southern point of the country from Dubrovnik all the way up to the Split area. And we'd usually have clients spend their time between Dubrovnik, get out to some of the islands, which include places like Hvar is a very popular place.
Mm-hmm.
Potentially another island called Korčula, and then probably finishing up their itinerary more in northern Dalmatia in the Split region to visit Split and some of the surrounding areas. One town we have people staying nearby to Split is called Trogir, actually a UNESCO World Heritage city.
Mm-hmm.
And also to make their way up inland a bit to one of the national parks, the Plitvice National Park. So a lot to do in a week, but the distances are not bad. So, you can cover a lot without feeling like you're rushed. And you can even get into some of the neighboring countries. Bosnia-Herzegovina is a potential day trip, and also to Montenegro. So you can really see and do a lot in a week's time in a kind of a smaller, concentrated area.
Okay. Let's go back and do that in a little more detail. You started us in Dubrovnik. So what would you recommend in terms of seeing in Dubrovnik? And interestingly enough, this is our second show on Croatia, I just should mention. The other one we did probably 5 years ago or so with Amanda Castleman, as I recall, about driving some of the back roads in Croatia, and we skipped Dubrovnik in this. So even though this is our second show, we actually did some different things. So you might want to go back and listen to that one as well. Although things have changed. I mean, it's a country that has changed quite a lot since the wars as things broke up in Yugoslavia, 20 years ago now? Or
Yeah, it's going on 20 years, but I'll tell you, they recovered quickly.
Croatia, I think, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you don't really don't notice much of the after effects there. And I think one thing about Croatia, and I'll get into Dubrovnik shortly, but they've really kept their authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of places that, start to experience more and more tourism, they start to get overbuilt and overrun. Whereas Croatia, I guess the government's really kind of has a strict policy where they just don't allow that mass building. So whether it's, 12 years ago when I was there or now, certainly things have changed, but the landscape, the buildings, that's still the same. So I think that's really a positive of Croatia. They've really kept that authenticity, which is a real plus.
Mm-hmm. Well, with Dubrovnik, you mentioned the orange roofs of Croatia, and Dubrovnik is one of those places where you're standing walking the walls of Dubrovnik and you look out and you see all the orange roofs.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, the orange roofs are the ones that were recently replaced, and so you can see that city was quite heavily damaged in that war, but of course has been rebuilt since.
Yeah, yeah.
You said it retains its authenticity. I would have to say Dubrovnik was so beautiful and so clean and so amazing in terms of the architecture and the history and such. It felt like Disney to us. I honestly think we didn't even believe the sky was real. It was just one of those things that it just seemed like somebody's idyllic view of what medieval Europe should look like.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, especially when you arrive to the airport there and your drive from the airport, which I've done on several occasions, and it never gets old. You kind of come in to Dubrovnik from above, and your first glimpse, the old town just kind of juts out into these beautiful crystal clear blue waters, and it's just spectacular. So it's an incredible introduction to the country for people who make that the start of their trip. But in terms of Dubrovnik, it is a compact old town center, which makes it very easy to explore by foot. Actually, that's really the only option.
That's true. Well, we should say very easy to explore by foot, but we should warn people who have mobility issues.
Yes.
That half of the old town is relatively flat, but for instance, one of the gates is just all stairs going down. And for instance, we stayed up on the hillside, and that walk back to the apartment with a gorgeous view of the old city. But you did earn that. We did work off the pasta or whatever we had eaten for dinner getting back to the apartment at night. So a very hilly area for both walking and then, for instance, if you rent a car for driving, it gets a little more interesting.
Yeah, certainly something to be prepared for. And that area you stayed in is known as Ploče, which we tend to have a lot of people stay in that area for that reason you mentioned, for the incredible views, because you kind of look out on the sea and the old town. But yeah, you often have to work for it, but as most of our clients would agree, the views are well worth the climb.
Absolutely.
So going back to kind of what to see and do in Dubrovnik, I guess I think one of the best ways to start any stay in Dubrovnik is by walking the city walls. Again, as we mentioned, definitely some stairs to climb, but it really gives you a great perspective around the city from above and also looking out into the sea. The walk circles the entire old town, so you get a really interesting vantage point, and I think it's a good way to kind of introduce you to the city.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, another great activity is to take the cable car. There's a cable car which actually during the war had been destroyed, and they brought back a few years ago. So that takes you well above the city to what they call Mount Surge. And from above, you just get breathtaking views over the city. So that's well worth a visit.
And what I saw for that when we were there, which was September, so not the height of the tourist season, but still a number of tourists there, is it probably took maybe half hour to 45 minutes of wait on both ends. So just plan accordingly for that. And I suspect in August, we're probably talking about longer lines than that.
Yeah, a lot can depend. And this is a big point to bring up on the cruise ship traffic.
Right. That's true.
Maybe the only negative I can come up with for Dubrovnik is the influx of cruise ships coming into the city. So we often advise our clients just to plan your time around that, because typically cruise ships will come in the morning. So probably from about 10, 11 till about 3 or 4 in the afternoon is when it's at its strongest, and that's when the visitors are there.
Mm-hmm.
So we often tell clients, do things like the city wall walk maybe first thing in the morning or later in the evening. Same goes with the cable car, and maybe do other activities during the day, like kayaking trips, or get out to nearby Lockram Island, which we highly recommend, and it's a really nice getaway from the old town traffic.
Mm-hmm. And that's the one with the simple ferry that goes right from the Dubrovnik Old Town Harbor.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a 15-minute ferry ride, so very easy. They run, depending on the season, pretty much every half an hour to hour, kind of on the hour sort of thing. So very easy to plan, and I think an ideal 3-4 hour trip to avoid that cruise ship madness a little bit.
Well, and we did it slightly different on our trip because you had recommended, or your staff had hooked us up with a walking tour. So we started with that, and then that guide recommended we actually wait and do the walking tour of the walls at about 5 o'clock.
Exactly.
And that actually turned out to be nice because there were far fewer people up there on the walls because, as you say, the cruise traffic had gone away at that point. You can easily notice the large groups of people following their lollipops with the different cruise names.
Something holding a sign.
Yeah, through the city, especially on the main cross street.
The Strada, which is the main boulevard there.
But by 5 o'clock, they had all gone back to the cruise ship, and then we were also up there for sunset.
Yeah.
As the orange light hits all the orange roofs, and it was a wonderful time to be up there, and the weather was a little cooler by that time too, so that turned out to be a real good suggestion as well.
Exactly, yeah. So not only avoiding the traffic, but in some cases avoiding the strongest heat of the day, especially when you're walking some of those stairs.
Yeah, the wall itself is not flat. Yeah, as we mentioned, the city is on a little bit of quite a lot of a hill, so you actually have to hike up to some of the sections of the wall.
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, between some of those activities and just generally exploring the old town and, getting lost, which is a lot of fun sometimes as well, that should certainly fill up a full day, if not more. And then depending on the time you have, we'll usually have people spend 2 or 3 nights in Dubrovnik. If you have that extra night, maybe to consider some of the day trips we had mentioned, getting out to Montenegro nearby. It's about an hour and a half away. And the highlight there is the Bay of Kotor. So we have a lot of people do that. And, kind of interesting to get out to another country that's so close by. And again, just breathtaking scenery there. And the Bay of Kotor is surrounded by fjord-like mountains. So really another spectacular sight welcomes you there. And then another option is getting into Bosnia-Herzegovina to a town called Mostar, which is a really unique town.
Gorgeous town.
Bosnia is a Muslim country primarily, so you're going to get a lot of influences there.
I was surprised that was my impression, but when I looked around when we were there, it's only about 40% Muslim. There's no majority in the country, but it has the Muslim influences, obviously, and it depends obviously on where you are.
Yeah, so in Mostar, you'll see the shopping bazaar and the mosques, and get a real mix of culture there because of the recent war history. There was a conflict between religions, so that would be more of a cultural trip, I would say, whereas Montenegro might be more for the natural beauty and landscape.
And we have done shows both on Bosnia with Stephanie Yoder, her favorite country, Stephanie from 20-something Travels, and then also with Ralph Velasco talking about Montenegro. So you can check out both those shows. We did not get to Montenegro, and I would have to say with the 2 nights we had in Dubrovnik, we didn't even have time really to do like a sea kayak, as you mentioned, or go out to the island. So I would say you could probably even do 3 nights there and add on to that if you wanted to do Montenegro. Mostar, that's a bit of a drive, too. That one, you have to drive up and over to get there. And we did. We started in Sarajevo because we actually did our flights. We were flying on miles and thoroughly enjoyed Bosnia, but we'll talk about that in another show. And we were glad for some of the suggestions.
Yeah, you're looking at about a 2.5-hour drive from Dubrovnik. So, yeah, a bit longer, but you get a fair amount of time in Mostar. So some beautiful drive along the coast on the way, so certainly a lot to see as you drive.
And the only other thing I would say is you mentioned the gondola, the going up in the tram for the views. There's also a museum up there. I did not plan my time accordingly so that I had any time to go into the museum about the war. Did hit Dubrovnik as well when the Serbians and the Montenegrins were shelling the city.
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about 20 years ago that everything happened. So, still fresh. So definitely,
right.
I think something to give, interesting perspective of what people went through not too long ago in that area.
Excellent. Anything else you would recommend for Dubrovnik before we head further north?
Well, I have one personal favorite in terms of catching a sunset. There's a bar on the outside of the city walls called Buja Bar. And I highly recommend for a sunset. It's pretty spectacular. Enjoy a local beer or wine and, kind of sit on the walls and watch the sea and the boats go by. So it's pretty spectacular.
Excellent. Where to next?
Well, generally we have people head out to the islands. And if we're talking about a week itinerary, we'd probably have people just visit one island during that time. And typically we have people go to the island of Hvar,
which is another UNESCO site, as I recall. Do I have that correctly?
Hvar is not actually.
Okay, sorry, there was one of them that is off the coast there, but I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, Hvar is not. But ways to get there. Recently, they added a direct catamaran, so like a speed ferry service, which takes about 3 hours. So that's certainly the quickest way to get between the two. There are other options, potentially taking a bus up to Split and then a ferry over to Hvar, or even arranging for a driver to take you up the coast and then kind of driving the length of Hvar. Hvar is actually the longest island in Croatia. So some really pretty views along that drive as well. But we find, for the sake of time and, taking advantage of the time you have in the area, that direct catamaran's probably the best bet, as it takes about 3 hours.
And I'm going to have to correct you, Jay, because the Stari Grad Plain in Hvar is a UNESCO site.
Oh, you're right. Excuse me. You're right.
Score 1 for the host.
Oh, you got it. You beat me on that, because actually we send people to Hvar town, and Stari Grad is another town on the island of Hvar. So you are correct.
And I don't remember exactly how long Hvar is. I mean, we looked at it, but our trip was a little more rushed than what we're describing. And I think what you're describing is a better itinerary in many ways than what we did, although we had a wonderful trip. So how long is the island?
I don't know for sure, but I want to say something around 50 miles long.
Okay. Yeah, I knew that had, as you said, was the largest one, but I wasn't sure how far. Yeah, that sounds about right. I think 68 kilometers is what I'm saying, 42 miles.
Okay. So I guess fairly well, my distances.
That was pretty good. We'll give you that one.
Thanks. I appreciate it. But yeah, I would say Hvar, I mean, when you're taking the catamaran, I'm just going off of my experiences and maybe basic kind of my first impression of Hvar. I mean, you cruise into this beautiful plush green island and pull into this just gorgeous port with these amazing sailboats, palm trees, beautiful villas, again, the orange rooftops, a beautiful fortress overlooking the city. So just really picturesque. And I think also along the lines of what you said, is this real when you're coming in? So it's really a sight to see as you pull up on the boat into the main port, and get into this just gorgeous town, which is always alive and has a great atmosphere, and things are always happening, and, people are happy. So it's just overall just this great summer atmosphere that and a buzz that, I think really makes Hvar kind of this electric place, so to speak. And I think there typically we have people spend, again, if you have a week's time, probably a couple of nights. Hvar is probably a more relaxing feel, because it is an island. Dubrovnik, is the place where you're probably going to be involved with a lot more sightseeing and maybe busier. So Hvar, being an island, is a place you can unwind a little bit and just kind of take in the beautiful surroundings. So, you'll probably spend your time in the old town exploring that, enjoying, nice dinners and outdoor dining and that sort of thing, and kind of walking along the coast, enjoying some of the beach and swimming areas. One definite from Hvar, there's a chain of 21 islands off the coast of the old town there. They're known as the Lenny Islands. And a typical trip we have clients take is for the day to either take their own boat out or as part of an excursion, or even have a private boat driver take you out and just kind of cruise through these islands for the day. And there's just beautiful secluded coves and just really kind of untouched, beautiful nature. And it's just a really relaxing, gorgeous day out on the water. You can do a lot of swimming, and in particular we have clients, there's a great lunch place we send clients to, which is actually an old farmhouse on one of the islands, where they prepare all of their own food from the farm and the wine from their vineyards, and you're sitting in this farmhouse looking over at the sea and eating amazing food and having a few glasses of wine. So it's just a really nice, relaxing day out to get outside of the old town a little bit and really unwind.
Excellent. Now, that ferry that goes to Hvar is leaving from Dubrovnik?
Yeah, it leaves from Dubrovnik, so it's a direct ferry.
Okay.
Quite easy, like I said, around 3 hours. And both of the ports are more or less right in the town, so you're probably in Dubrovnik, maybe a 10 10-minute taxi ride to get you to the port there. And then in Hvar, you're dropped off right in the main port.
Okay. That's leaving, I assume, from the new part of town rather than the old part of town in Dubrovnik.
In Dubrovnik, yeah, from Port and Bruges. Okay. So yeah, that's the kind of the outside the old town area. So outside where we typically have people stay.
Okay, excellent. Where to next?
So yeah, after let's say a couple nights in Hvar, we have you take another speed ferry, a catamaran, back over to the mainland, and it's a quicker ride this time around. It's an hour ferry back over to Split, and we typically do not have clients stay in Split. Actually, we have them stay in an alternative in a town called Trogir, which I mentioned earlier.
Which we did. Gorgeous little town.
Yeah, gorgeous little town. I mean, don't get me wrong, Split's well worth a look.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because we have people get off the ferry in Split, check your bags. There's a bag check where for $1 or $2 an hour, you can check your bags safely, go out, explore the old town of Split, which is another UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Oh, that's nice.
So needless to say, well worth a look. So spend a few hours there.
Well, in a more unusual one, since Split has this interesting history where it kind of built up around and into the old palace of Diocletian. So, which in an odd way, as you're looking at from the coastline at the old town, you're actually looking at one of the walls of the palace.
Exactly.
So, a very interesting spot. You know, it wasn't like somebody decided. It would more happened organically over time as they kind of took over the palace with a city. But interesting how they incorporated that in the city and yet preserved enough of it to be interesting to see.
Yeah, certainly preserved a lot. I mean, you have all the ancient Roman artifacts there, as you mentioned, the Diocletian's palace. So enough to keep you busy for a couple hours, and certainly to enjoy the seafront there, the promenade, have a nice lunch for a few hours, and then do a little bit of shopping, and then you're on your way. And we really think that's enough time spent in Split.
Now, of course, the emperor would disagree with you. I mean, this is the place where one of the only Roman emperors to actually retired too, and he had a lot of places he could choose. So he thought it was such a wonderful place, and of course and he grew such lovely cabbages there. When they asked him to come back to power, he said, "Oh, if you could only see my cabbages, you wouldn't even ask." So,
well, yeah, I think that was before the port and the rest of the city was built up around it. So
yeah,
that's the main reason. I mean, the old town is great and Split, but kind of once you get outside of that, it is a larger kind of port town, and it is a large city.
Right. Yeah, it's more of a real town in some ways.
Exactly.
Although one thing I would recommend, and this we got from the guide that you hooked us up with, is there is an ice cream shop in Split, and I'm drawing a blank on the name, but it's up behind the theater, one block on the other side of the theater, and it's not from somebody from Croatia, and it starts with an L. I gotta tell you that, and I'll try and find the name of that and put it in the show notes.
Okay.
But they make new flavors of ice cream every day. So, very interesting, different flavors. I think I was trying one new flavor that they were doing that was carrot cake based.
Yeah.
And that was the first day they'd ever had it, and it may go away tomorrow, and so you never know what you're going to get, I guess, there is what the guide was telling us. But that was worth a stop.
Yeah, I got to hit the right day, I guess.
Exactly. Well, or have, some good luck, but they do good work there.
The right day and the right flavor. No, sounds good. You'll have to give me that for my next trip in Split. Yeah, so I mean, once you finish your time in Split, again, we send people up to Trogir. It's about a 30-minute drive north of Split. And again, just a much more charming, kind of authentic feel to it. It's essentially an island, the old town of Trogir, surrounded by city walls again. So a very walkable, pleasant little town.
Much smaller than Dubrovnik, for instance, yeah.
For sure. Probably half the size.
And the name of the ice cream place is Luka. Luka.
Okay. Yeah, which is a kind of typical Croatian name.
Except I don't think he's Croatian. I believe that there was information there that he was from somewhere else, but anyway.
Oh, it could be Italian.
I don't remember.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, in Trogir, I think a couple of nights. Another reason we have people base themselves in Trogir is so they can take advantage of a day trip to the nearby Plitvice National Park. Again, a little bit of a drive from Trogir, probably at about 2.5 hours each way. But, I think it adds a nice dimension to the trip, getting kind of inland and experiencing some of the more outdoorsy. It's a series of lakes that make up the park, and really spectacular color, green turquoise color to the lakes. And very easy to hike around. There's boat trips you can take on the lakes, and it's really well put together with a series of wooden footbridges that connect all the lakes. So a really pleasant walk and spectacular scenery with waterfalls.
Waterfalls everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere you turn. So just a really nice addition to the trip.
Well, I would say that you really should plan on hiking in Plivice. Don't plan on just going and looking at things. We didn't do the whole hike. Well, for one thing, we were there in the rain, so there wasn't necessarily the best day to be there, but still, even in a rainy day, it was a gorgeous, gorgeous place.
The signage there is very good. So depending on your abilities going into the park, you can choose from a few different routes that are marked, color-coded, and that sort of thing. And it kind of gives you, the estimated time that'll take to walk these certain routes. So some are more strenuous than others.
Well, you can also start at the top and walk down. And so a little less strenuous would you do it that way.
Exactly. If you go through to the different entrances. So there's 3 entrances. So it is well put together and pretty easy to manage on your own and figure out things when you get there.
A little trickier again if you have mobility issues.
Yes.
But for people who are in, good enough shape to hike, take a few hours at least and do the hike. It's not that big a deal, but really there are parts of the park you just wouldn't see.
Yeah, it's a must see. Definitely.
And you mentioned driving there. The one thing you didn't say is driving in Croatia is pretty nice. Their main highway is, I'd say, one of, if not the nicest highway I have ever driven on.
I tend to agree.
So for people who are thinking about, I don't know if I want to drive in a foreign country, I really think that Croatia, other than the fact that, when you're trying to get around Dubrovnik, I did ask for an upgrade to an automatic just because I had pictures of being stalled on one of those hills in Dubrovnik. But, in terms of the highway, it is a toll highway. And with lots, as you head inland towards Plivice and towards Zagreb, lots and lots of tunnels, but a very well-maintained, very new highway from what it looks like.
Very new. That must have been built maximum maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, it looks like it's some of the influx of money as they joined the EU.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and driving throughout Croatia for that southern itinerary we've been discussing, because you're dealing, going out to islands, that sort of thing. We tend to discourage a car for that purpose, but once, you get more inland and to the northern parts of Croatia, we actually do highly recommend driving, because some of the public transport in the north, unfortunately, is a bit lacking, and it is nice to have the flexibility of the car to be able to make stops along the way. And like you said, the roads are very good, a lot of new modern roads, and I think it's really pretty straightforward navigating your ways city to city.
I want to say that drivers are a little more relaxed than some of the drivers on the other side of the Adriatic there.
Oh, yeah.
At least in southern Italy. I think northern Italy is very similar. The driving's not difficult there either. But
yeah, for sure. A lot safer than driving in Italy, let's say, with your competition.
Yeah. And I did mention that it's part of the EU, but we're not on the euro.
Yes.
We should say.
Which is definitely to another advantage. I mean, still being on the local currency, the Croatian kuna, I think does help with some of the pricing.
Dubrovnik's still expensive just because of all the tourism, but I think once you got out of there, especially, we didn't talk about Zagreb, but we did talk about that in the other show, very inexpensive.
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, it's not Eastern Europe cheap, but it's not Western Europe expensive. It's something in between.
Exactly.
So, still bargains to be had. And, the strong dollar helps as well. So.
Exactly. What's going to surprise me when I go? Well, of course, I was just in Croatia. What's going to surprise the listener when they go to Croatia?
For me, it's how developed the country is. I think it's got a reputation, or due to its communist past and obviously the recent war history, that things might be a little rough over there, but it's quite the opposite. I think their infrastructure is excellent. They're very accustomed to tourists. I mean, tourism's their main industry, so they do the business of tourism very well. They have a very good approach to it. I think that's one thing that'll certainly surprise people. Another thing is the English level there. I think people expect, especially going into Central Eastern Europe, that they're, speaking to locals is going to be a challenge. But of the places we cover, which is about 20 countries in Central Eastern Europe, I would say Croatia is really one of the top in terms of their level of English. So people will not struggle with communication.
Which is probably good, since we picked up maybe 3 words of Serbo-Croatian.
Yeah, fair enough. You'll get Hvala, Dobar dan.
Yeah, exactly. That was it.
So the Živali, cheers. So some of the important stuff.
That's a real giveaway when you think cheers is one of the important phrases to know. But
Well, you need to know it. I mean, especially if you're drinking the local stuff. So it's very important. But one thing I touched on earlier, just how they've kept their authenticity. I think that's a really pleasant surprise, let's say, when you go to Croatia. You don't see these mass resorts and buildings on top, one on top of the other, and you still see the old houses and villas and again, the orange rooftop. So I think that's a big key to what Croatia offers. And I guess other surprises to me, at least initially when I went, and I think when people are coming in there, is just how much the country has to offer. From north to south, there's a lot of variety, whether it be in what's offered or the cities or activities available, from the national parks to the coastlines to the capital cities. So there is a lot of variety there. So yeah, it's just a surprise that one place can really have it all.
Well, and we're not talking about Zagreb so much, but we enjoyed that as well. But as they say in Split, I think they told us that the people in Zagreb just work a lot harder.
Yeah.
That basically the people in Split work 1 month of the year, August, when everybody from Zagreb comes down, and the people in Zagreb work 11 months of the year, and that there's just a different approach to life between the two areas. And when we told that to the tour guide that we had in Zagreb, she agreed. She said, "Oh yeah, we go to Split for our vacation and love it down there, but then we get back to work."
Yeah, that's why you probably don't want to go to Zagreb in August because the city empties out. They all go to the coast,
right?
And like you said, keep the people in Split busy for the month. Exactly.
And you mentioned how to say cheers. Are there things that we should try when we're there in terms of food, things to eat or drink?
First and foremost, when you're in Croatia, go right for the seafood. There's a real variety of seafood dishes there. Certainly fresh fish right out of the sea, very popular types of fish. You'll probably see things like, sea bass or sea bream, a lot of shellfish, oysters, mussels, if you're into those sort of things. I love things like octopus and squid. Maybe not for everyone, but I think if you try it there, you might change your mind. It's not the typical chewy calamari you might be used to at home. So it's things like octopus salad. They do things like octopus carpaccio, which I love. So first and foremost, definitely seafood. You'll find things like great olive oils, which are used in most of their dishes, and certainly a staple. So you'll try some delicious olive oils. And then in terms of things like, they have very good meats. One specialty is cooking meats under the bell, they call it. It's kind of a long process that takes a few hours of cooking things like lamb or veal, but it just makes it very tender and really delicious.
And that's peka? I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. P-E-K-A.
Peka. Yeah, P-E-K, exactly.
But one trick there was we didn't find a lot of places, for instance, in Dubrovnik that offer that, because we had some non-seafood eaters on our trip, including me.
Sure.
My daughter's a real meat and potatoes person, and this looked like the perfect meal for her.
Absolutely.
And we found a restaurant in Trogir that did do it, but you had to order, I think it was 3 hours ahead of time.
Yeah, most of them, if you're lucky, they'll have it ready. But yeah, in most cases, it's the kind of thing where you do need to order in advance. But some do kind of have it ready. So it's just a matter of finding the right place. But definitely something to seek out.
Well, and especially on the coast, too. If you're not a big seafood fan, there's still lots also of the Italian influence, pastas and pizzas and things like that.
Exactly.
So,
plenty of pizza places.
very easy place to get food, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fresh vegetables. I mean, with the mild, warm climate, you're going to get great vegetables. And one thing I've always liked in Croatia, they have great bread.
Oh, okay.
So great for dipping in your olive oil. So yeah, the food there I always enjoy. So you get a good mix of things. And like you said, a lot of Italian influence as well, which is never a bad thing.
What do the guidebooks recommend or the tourist board's going to tell me to do and you skipped over?
I guess in terms of what to avoid, it's more a question of when the guidebooks and different tour companies tend to recommend overnighting in certain places, and we might even say avoid those or just make them a quick stop.
Such as?
Yeah, I'll kind of run through. Between Dubrovnik and Split is a beautiful coastline, but there's not really any towns there of interest that are worth spending too much extended time. One that comes out a lot is Makarska. Gorgeous place, but it's more just known, again, for coastline beaches. It's kind of where European holidaymakers go. kind of a place you just don't need to overnight.
Okay.
Drive through it, stop and take a photo and enjoy the beautiful coastline, but as an overnight destination, definitely can pass on it. Another region we haven't talked about too much up in the north is the Istria region. And one town there that gets a lot of publicity is Pula. And again, somewhere we definitely recommend seeing, but no need to overnight there. I mean, it's got the famous Colosseum called the Arena. So it's kind of a small version of the Colosseum in Rome. So definitely worth a look, but kind of once you get beyond that, it's kind of another big city. So we tend to have people not stay there, but instead in a really charming Venetian fishing village called Rovine, which is on the coast as well. So that would be something to avoid, again, as an overnight destination, going to Pula. Couple other places the guidebooks seem to be high on are places like Rijeka, which is actually the largest port in Croatia, and maybe it gets the publicity just because it's a larger city, but it's a port town, so somewhere definitely to avoid. And then another town that gets a lot of pub is Opatia. And we think a nice enough town, but it just doesn't compare to what else is out there. We see Opatia on a lot of other tour companies' itinerary, and we just don't think it compares to places like Dubrovnik, like Trogir, like Rovine that I just mentioned. So probably another place you could bypass. Other than that, I mean, we talked about Split a little bit. Well worth a look, but again, maybe not the ideal overnight destination. Instead, maybe to go to Trogir.
As we start to wind this down, before I get to my last 4 questions, anything else we should know before we head to Croatia?
Just in terms of getting prepared for the trip?
Sure.
I mean, it's casual, which is, I think, very nice. So it's a place where you can go and get your shorts and your T-shirt and feel very relaxed. And so you don't have to worry too much about being spiffed up for dinner. And it's just an easygoing place. Other things in terms of going to Croatia, I think that, we've touched on a few things so far. Just being aware of going into your itinerary, some of the things to prepare for, like the transport in terms of accommodation. So a lot of the things we help with, to be honest. So
Sure. You're standing in the prettiest spot in all of Croatia. Where are you standing? What are you looking at?
There's so many. The thing about Croatia, it's just one breathtaking spot after another.
I'm going to pin you down to your favorite.
Okay, I guess it's what I spoke about earlier. It's that drive in from the airport when you just see from above the old town of Dubrovnik. It's like you're on this road and, around you is the sea and beautiful things. And then you kind of come over this hill and you're coming down and then just this, as you said, this spectacular, almost not real city pops out and you see the rooftops and you see the sea around it and the boats and it's just something you never forget.
I'll back you up on that.
Yeah, I made that trip so many times, and I look forward to that moment when I'm coming in, and it's kind of like I'm back. This is it. I'm here again, and it's just spectacular.
Well, and for us, I don't know if it was in the drive-in. I think it was more of when we opened the balcony windows from the apartment we were staying in, and it was, it was that. So.
Yeah, I lived about 6 months in Dubrovnik. I've traveled there numerous times, and I'm still wow every time I go there.
Finish this thought. You really know you're in Croatia when what?
I don't know. Everything's kind of free and easy. At least for me, when I get there, and it's the surroundings that create that. I mean, to have that stunning nature and the sea around you, and for the most part, smiling people, not only the locals, but people around you just seem to be happy because of where they are. You just have this relaxed, easygoing feeling, and it just permeates through the whole country and through your whole experience. And it's a place where you can really sit back and enjoy what's around you, just because everything's so spectacular. And maybe the locals create that, and it's an atmosphere that I've found hard to find in other places, and I think that's what makes it so special.
And if you had to summarize the whole country in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Oh, this is actually my staff will like this. Nema problema.
No problem.
Which means no problem. And it really does capture the mood of the country. So I'll have to go with that, even though it's in another language, but you get the idea.
Excellent. And our guest again has been Jay from J-Way Travels. And what is your website, Jay?
Oh, no problem. www.jwaytravel.com.
Excellent. And thank you so much for the sponsorship you've been doing of the transcripts. And I will say again, and Jay did not pay me to say this, although he's welcome to do so. We had a great experience using your services and your staff to plan our trip. And I'll be honest that when we got the quote for how much things were going to be, we wrote back. I don't know if you know this. We wrote back and said, "Is that per person?"
Well, let's say we gave you a good price, but no. Yeah, I will say, and definitely feedback from our clients for the service we provide, and I truly believe it's an excellent value for money.
Well, and part of that's because of where we went to. For instance, we added in Bosnia, and Bosnia is less expensive. And then we added in Zagreb, and Zagreb is, less expensive than Dubrovnik too. But it was, we're used to planning our own trips, but I will say we appreciated the things like airport pickups and guided tours being arranged and rental cars and all that. So thanks for what you do. Thanks for coming on the Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your obvious love for Croatia.
Thanks so much, Chris. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
In news of the community, just a quick reminder that trip to Cambodia for April of 2016 is still on sale. There are a limited number of people that can go on that trip, so if you want to do it, you might want to sign up as soon as you can. And more information about that at amateurtraveler.com/trip, which is our closed Facebook community for trips. I had a comment from Spencer on the episode we did on the Viking River cruise on the Douro River. Great episode. Made me want to consider river cruising in 20 years. I also like the format with multiple people. However, I don't remember hearing the cost of the cruise. Can you give us some ideas? Yeah, we didn't mention the cost of the cruise, although that is on their website. And one of the things to be aware of with costs of cruises, river cruises in particular, is it can depend a lot on the dates. So, for instance, the same cabin, the standard cabin that's $2,500 this November was $3,600 in July. So it can depend a lot on when you go as well. So check that out on their website for the latest pricing information. With that, we'll end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. If you are an owner of an Android phone, you may be interested to know that podcasts are coming to the Google Play Store pretty soon, and The Amateur Traveler will be one of those podcasts. So wherever you find your podcasts, don't miss an episode by subscribing. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
Got to see one more.